And yet, ironically, well, one of the main features of many of the polymers that we produce is that they do, if we care to take that route, have high end of life recyclability. And so that's part of the solution, really, rather than discarding and throwing away debris, plastics at the end of their life, throwing them away and then becoming debris. It's about turning end of life plastic into beginning of life plastic. And the way we need to do that is to design for end of life so that a plastic bottle can become a plastic bottle again. That we have what I would call closed loop recycling. It's not just about recycling and turning end of life plastic into an item that's perhaps inferior, like a pallet or a garden bench that traditionally was built of another material. It's about reducing our linear use of oil. At the moment, 8% of world oil production is going into the production of plastics, and a third of them are disposable items that we're throwing away. So what we need to do to reduce that use of oil, I would argue, because we're actually quite short of oil, and we're going to get increasingly short of oil, rather than going from oil via plastics into landfill, what we need to do is to think about reducing our use of oil by designing for end-of-life recyclability so that a plastic bottle can become a plastic bottle over again. And I think if we do that, then society will start to put a higher value on what we currently see as valueless waste. I think, as a population, as a species, we don't like waste. We are quite wasteful human beings, but we don't deliberately go out to waste in many cases where there are viable alternatives on offer. So I think the solution is about identifying that end-of-life plastics actually do have a value. But there's a role for us all to play. I mean, as individuals, as consumers, we need to make sure that we dispose of end-of-life plastic properly. But there's also a very important role for industry to design for that end-of-life phase. At the moment, I think we do a very good job of designing plastic packaging to get goods safely to the marketplace, so food and drink doesn't perish in the shops and we don't get wastage. Of course, that's very, very important. We also expend an awful lot of energy and effort in designing packaging for marketing purposes, to sell the products. And I've got no quibble with that at all, provided it doesn't compromise the potential for those packaging items to be recycled at the end of the lifetime. And all too often I feel that the goods that I see in the supermarket have had very, very little attention focused on the end of life, what will happen at the end of life. And I've got two plastic bottles here, both carrying a soft drink to us, both available through everyday retailers. I bought these at the local train station. One of them almost 100% recyclability at the end of its life. The other one, in the words of a recycler that I know quite well, would be an absolute devil to recycle. And yet they're both doing the same job. This one's got around about 7 different parts that, if you break it down, could result as litter in the environment, could potentially cause harm to marine life. This one's only got 2 parts to it. This one is carrying more liquid and yet is actually lighter than this one. So we're starting here to use minimal amount of plastic to do the job necessary. This one's very, very heavily pigmented, which is going to limit the diversity of products that could be made out of this bottle if we were to recycle it, compared to this one, which is virtually transparent, could be recycled into quite a wide range of products. And yet they're both made of the same polymer. They're both made of PET. They're both doing the same job, and yet one of them much more economical to recycle, to use over and over again, than the other one. So, my challenge to industry is why aren't we thinking a little bit more about the end of life when we're designing packaging to get goods to consumers in the marketplace, as well as thinking about the marketing. I feel that there's a marketing advantage there actually to be exploited, because I think most members of the public are very keen to do the right thing, and I also feel there's a role here for governments to become involved, because it's now mandatory that we've got on the side of this bottle how much fat, how much calories, how much sugar are in the drink that's contained in the packaging. I'd quite like to see some information on here about the environmental footprint that the packaging has, because I think we've seen from consumers' reduction in use of plastic carrier bags, of disposable carrier bags, that now increasingly at the supermarket I go to, members of the public are bringing their own bags because they recognise that they don't need a disposable carrier to take home goods that are already fairly overpackaged in the first place. So I think the consumers are really keen to do the right thing. It's just that the information flow is a little bit muddled and confusing. So I think there's a clear role for an independent watchdog to put some standards out there as to the environmental footprint of different types of packaging, I think you'd see consumers would rapidly respond to that, and that would put then pressure and an economic incentive, if you like, to industry to think much more seriously about designing plastic packaging for end-of-life recyclability. I'm hitting on packaging quite a lot because it's one of our biggest frustrations. As I say, around a third of all the plastic we produce is going into packaging that lasts only for about a year or so. But if we can solve some of the problems there with plastic packaging, I think we could make major advances in the quantities of waste plastic that we produce.